So Manchester United have issued a statement saying that they have parted ways with Erik ten Hag and that Ruud van Nistelrooy will be taking charge for the time being. He's left his role as Manchester United's first-team manager. They acknowledge his achievements in that time and say they're grateful to him, and then point out that while they are looking for a permanent head coach, Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to take charge of the team as interim head coach. Sean Wright-Phillips and Miguel Delaney are here. Wrighty, you said that you felt that this was a decision that was coming, and we've talked a lot about the things that have been going wrong at Manchester United, and in fact further back than Erik ten Hag's time as manager. But there is something in being sacked after that game against West Ham where they concede that penalty in the weirdest of decisions. It feels like there were other games where it would have made more sense.
It would have made sense, but obviously Coventry didn't finish him off in that semi-final, but that probably would have been the one for him to go. But for him to go in this game with the amount of chances they missed, and I've already mentioned today that this is one of the worst penalty decisions I've ever seen. I've played football a long time, and I just can't see how they've come up with that decision. I don't care what Michael Oliver says. In his time of leisure, he'll look at that and he'll say, you know what, maybe, did I even need to let them check that? Do I need to even let him check it? So he's had that decision to deal with, Ten Hag, and he's also got to watch that first half of his team just miss chance after chance after chance. It's, in the end, yes, they've sacked him after this game, but it's so many times he could have been sacked.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long time coming for reasons that we've discussed a lot over the last couple of years, Sean.
Last time I was on, I basically said, well, if he's not doing the job that you hire him to do, to sack him. But even now, when I think about it, to sack him after this game is just strange. You give him an extension in the summer. You've also gave him something like 200 million to spend, and then 8 weeks later, you sack him. If I get it, I don't want nobody to ever lose their job, but I mean, it's just timing. It's just wrong. They had the start of the season to make this decision, bring somebody fresh in and let them grow with the players and the club, and they chose otherwise. And now they're in a situation where effectively they have to find somebody else, whenever that may be, and whoever it may be, to come in and effectively start again. And is he going to want new players as well, or is he just going to work with what he's got?
With that decision that they made over the summer, that they were looking for another manager at Manchester United, then they decide to stick with Erik ten Hag. Once the owners and the manager are in those kind of conversations, is it just borrowed time, Miguel? Oh,
completely. In fact, I think this is actually a decision that sums up the club's indecision and actually doesn't speak that well to... I mean, they've obviously got this new football leadership now in Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe and everyone he's hired, but it doesn't exactly speak to the clarity of their thinking right now. I mean, to be honest, I think they made this decision, well, from what I've heard as well, they basically made this decision before the cup final. Obviously, the cup final ensured there was a kind of emotional momentum of its own, but then, as you say, they did interview him for his own job, as he knew they were speaking to other people. So what did that say? That undermined the season before it began. And I think really what it came down to was, and this is the case throughout this season as well, they knew they eventually had to get rid. The issue was, who do they bring in instead? And that's why this decision is made so late, and has the potential, I suppose, to just write off yet another season for Manchester United. It's the first really big decision for the new ownership group, isn't it? I mean, I know they've made changes behind the scenes, and I know that they were having those conversations over the summer, but in the end, they decided to stick with what they already had. Now, this is going to be a manager coming in who represents them, who is their man.
Yeah, and so the pressure is very much on them, because like I say...
It's them who is their man.
Yeah, and so the pressure is very much on them. Because, like I say, you rightly mentioned there, Miggy, they were looking for people, and it's obvious that he probably heard about this scenario, what was happening. Then you're looking at 2.5, maybe 2 and a bit more years of him being there, and still no pattern of play, still no identity in how they're going to play. I remember at the start it was going to be the best transitional team in the world. We still don't know what's happened with all that situation, but for him to still be there with all that going on, and the fact that they obviously couldn't find the manager while he's there, it was He was always. It was like he's a zombie. He's just waiting to just pass.
I mean, we're talking about, I suppose, what will be described in media terms as a post-mortem now. But as you say, it's been essentially been a zombie regime for months.
Yeah, exactly what it's been.
I just, before we move on to what's next for Manchester United, I just wonder what the Ten Hag era will be remembered for at Manchester United, because as they point out in their own statement, and as Ten Hag has said, he won trophies. So is there a sense that it's not all?
They'll say he won trophies, but it will come with a tinge of but.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It has to come with a tinge of but. His signings have been terrible. What he's done. Again, we're talking about a club of Manchester United size, a manager that's coming from, yes, we know that Ajax is from bottom to top in the way they play. It's a structured way they're going to play. I'm thinking that he's going to come in and instill that structure into Man United. And then Man United were going to start playing in a certain way, because obviously that's why you're going to get Ten Hag from Ajax. Because his team plays good football, expansive football. And then he comes and it doesn't happen and we don't see anything else happen.
Yeah.
Isn't
that, in terms of his legacy, doesn't that actually what his legacy almost is summing up his decline right now? Yes, he'll point to the League Cup and the FA Cup justifiably, found they are trophies. But United are a club that point to much more than that. These aren't the trophies they want. They want leagues and Champions Leagues.
Yeah.
And he was never. In fact, he was further away.
Somebody who was instrumental in those glory years for Manchester United, Peter Schmeichel, joins us on the line now. Peter, I don't think anyone is necessarily surprised that Manchester United have made this decision, but there is a huge decision to be made now by Ineos and by Jim Ratcliffe in terms of who comes in. What do you think Manchester United need to go for? What do they want from a new manager?
First of all, hello everyone, nice to see you. And Kelly, what a great question to start off with. You could have softened it up a little bit. So Ineos they've already made all the structural changes to the football club. So I think they are sort of excusing themselves with leaving this decision that Miguel said was inevitable, was already made before the cup final. I think they've excused themselves with giving the new guys time to settle in and actually see how this new structure is going to work. And to change the manager in that period would have probably been a little bit too much for them. They've done it now. I'm like you, a little bit curious about the timings of it. We've just been through an international break where when they left for that, it was much better than what it is this Monday morning. So why didn't they do it then and bring somebody in? I mean, they've had enough time to get the next name on the list lined up, and then let this person have the time that an international break gives you to get used to Carrington, get used to Old Trafford, have really, really soft beginning. Now we're back to what we've seen before with an interim manager. They've obviously said that Ruud's going to take over. I mean, I don't know how good a manager Ruud van Nistelrooy is, but he was a really, really good player. If he can bring some of that to the team, he might have a chance of staying on. But it's all, a little bit of the same old. I honestly feel it's a bit of the same old. We've been here before. We tried somebody out. It didn't work. 2 years and a bit. We're changing again. There isn't a new one lined up. There isn't a plan. And that's what really makes me sad. And I just want to say, I feel really, really sorry for Erik ten Hag. I don't think he didn't have the opportunity that, being named the Manchester United manager carries. The club was, so many new things were happening when he took over. And obviously the club was put up for sale. The focus on that sale was, nearly 100%. The new people's come in and spend a lot of time on finding their feet at Manchester United. And I don't think that Erik ten Hag has had the support that he needed. He needed to be guided a little bit in what kinds of players that you bring into Manchester United. He needed to be guided and supported in that. And I think that he was left a little bit on his own. And I don't think that's not how modern day football management works.
Pete, I was going to say, just to say with Ten Hag, I think when he came, he said that one of the things that he has to have is control of who he brings into the club in respect of the players and who he wants to bring. But the question I wanted to ask Pete is, as a coach, with the two and a bit years that he's been there, with what you've seen of Erik ten Hag, as much as we all feel sorry for him, because you don't want to see someone lose their job, was he a good enough manager for a coach for Manchester United? For me, I don't think he was, with his record.
No, I think at the end of the day, Righty, we know this because we've been through it. You are only judged on your results. And yes, he did win the League Cup and he did win the FA Cup, but he did win the FA Cup and finished 8th. He never made the group stage of the Champions League, which is something that Manchester United are required to do. This is something they must do.
Yep.
We are not in this new format Champions League. We're not there. We're not there to make history. That is, an absolute requirement for Manchester United. And so you can say, yes, the results weren't there. When I talk about support, I understand when you come in that you want to have control over what players you bring in. And you can have an idea about the players that you know are playing well and has worked well for wherever you've been with these players. But we are not talking about Ajax. We're not talking about, other clubs. We're talking about Manchester United. If you step out of line, a little bit too often with Manchester United, the pressure, the media pressure, the supporting, the fans pressure, it's relentless. And it's not just local to Manchester or to the UK. This is everywhere in the world. And the thing, what I can guarantee you that every media everywhere in the world is talking about this. That is how big and how powerful Manchester United they are. So you have to perform to a different level. That means you need different characters. Yes, you can have good players, good dribblers, good, technical, skillful players, but mentally, are they strong enough to be at Manchester United? And this is what we've seen. I mean, I came to the club in 1991. So from 91 and up until now, this is what I'm looking at. The players coming in, are they good enough mentally? And I've played with players that were not the best players in the world, but they were fantastic Manchester United players. And I've seen players coming in with the greatest of reputations, and they just can't hack it. So when I talk about support for Erik ten Hag, yes, he wants control over who he brings in, but he needed someone to say, hey, this player won't work here. That cannot happen. You need to hold back a little bit. And I think he's probably been allowed to sign 3 or 4 players that should never have been brought in because, he asked for full control and the people behind him who are not there anymore were not strong enough to say, no, that's not going to work. And I feel sorry for him because I don't think he's not a bad person. He's not a bad coach for sure. He's shown that. He was just a little bit out of his depth. And especially here in the last couple of months, he's come out every pre-match press conference, come out fighting. He's come out after every game. He's never shied away from that, and he's been fighting his corner. And I admire that. But at the end of the day, Miguel said it there. He used the word. It was inevitable. It was already decided before the cup final. I don't know about that, but this is something I think everyone who knows about football, they've expected to happen.
Pete, just a quick one. With all that given, said, and what's been done, it is where it is now. Don't you think there was an issue with the fact that Man United haven't had an identity or a style of play for over 2.5 years?
I think for longer than 2.5 years, if I'm honest. This is it. We've been trying this and that for ever since Alex left. There's a clear identity, not just on the football pitch, but in the football club when he left. And that identity has slowly disappeared. And I think that's quite evident when you watch the team play. You don't really know, even, somebody who loves Man United like me, a football fan, we don't really know what style of play we're playing, and yesterday, what you said before, right, it was, being sacked after a game where, they missed that many chances. Yeah, but that is the issue, we've not scored enough goals in his time. At the end of the day, that comes down to the coaching and all of that. But I said this before, we've been sort of stumbling along since Alex left, and I kind of feel that we are there now. And I really, honestly, really do hope with the time, if Miguel is right about the inevitability of Ten Hag leaving the job, and it was decided back then, I really, really do hope that the new establishment, that they've got a list of people that there's a number one, and that number one is already on his way to Manchester now. I really do hope that, because going through a period with an interim manager again, that's going to hurt the football club, and that's going to put the football club even further backwards. And I don't think we can afford that. I don't think we're not strong enough to deal with that. For the longer this goes on, the longer it will take for somebody to come in and correct it.
Peter, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know you'll be hoping that decision will be made quickly and will be the right person in charge of Manchester United. But we wait for the announcement. Thank you very much to Peter Schmeichel. I just wonder, Miguel, if what this says about the leadership, or maybe more personally, what will it tell us about the leadership, how this is handled? Well,
they've suddenly got a massive decision. Obviously it's about it's a historic decision to the club, but it's also going to speak a lot about the future, because I think the big one they've had to make so far, they've struggled with it. That's why we're here. And in that time, they've let a number of potential candidates, potential long-term candidates. 3 of them will be at the 2026 World Cup. Julian Nagelsmann, fair enough, he's a bit before, having been with Germany. Pochettino, who's gone to the US national team in a time since Ten Hag has been under question. And now Thomas Tuchel,
yeah.
who, a lot of people say that he would have been Sir Jim Ratcliffe's top choice. And now, mere weeks situation. And it does maybe... one of the big things with the new Ineos leadership, and Peter touched on it there, is the number of appointments they've made. Peter spoke about the change of structure. It's a structure with a lot of layers, a lot of big voices. I reported that week during the international break when Ten Hag, it looked like they were going to make the decision, but they didn't. And that was partly because they had this 7-hour meeting, and in that meeting, Ratcliffe said to the hierarchy of the club, right, let's all lay out our cases for every situation, real kind of the high performance thinking, as they put it, and every decision is thorough. But all that led to was a number of senior figures putting through multiple cases and this indecision. And is that going to be an issue going forward now when they try and decide on who next, especially when there's suddenly this paucity of candidates?
Well, especially when we look at the form that Manchester United have been in, not just this season, but particularly this season, which is what has led to the decision. And what that tells us about how far Manchester United are from challenging for the titles that their fans, that the size of the club would expect them to be challenging for.
Yeah, for me, that they're miles away from it. It's a massive project for whatever manager or however they want to do it. They're going to get it, try and figure a way to get it done. But in terms of the team, you wouldn't necessarily say the team is just a bad team. I think they got some beautiful and talented individuals.
Well, that's the reason why they won their cups.
Exactly that. In that team, I think it's almost like they need guidance. I think if you look at a lot of the bigger teams in the Premier League now, they all have a way to play. They all have a system. Every player knows what they're doing, whether it's attacking, defending, whether they're on the bench, they still know what they're doing when they come on. Whereas when I watch Man United, I know Pete said the identity behind the scene, I still feel like on the pitch, the manager has to take control and guide the players into how you want them to play, because individual brilliance only takes you so far. You're only going to have moments of magic. But when you come up against the top teams, you will find out more times than none. You will lose most of them.
And I wonder if that's maybe one of the things that we are going to find out about Ineos, under Jim Ratcliffe, that they are going to be maybe moving in a certain direction, if we'll learn a bit about the type of football they want to play. Because Manchester United at the moment find themselves as close to the relegation places, they're 7 points away from there, as they are to top four, which just outlines, the journey that they have to go on. And because we don't know what Manchester United's style of football is, when, for example, Manchester City did it with Pep Guardiola, they sort of built the club in order to bring Pep Guardiola in. So they said, we want to play this way from top to bottom. We want to bring in these people at board level, and we want to give Guardiola the support to build a club in his image, if you like. Now we're going to see whether Manchester United have that vision. Is maybe the right one.
I think the more you think about it, and the way that since Ineos has come in and Sir Jim Ratcliffe has come in, everything what's happened up to this point, everything what's gone on behind the scenes, we're hearing about disgruntled stuff behind the scenes, and that's going to happen when someone comes in and there's cuts. So that's going to happen instantly and straight away. And then you're talking about the way they've dealt with the managerial side of it, and whether they're going to get rid of this manager, whether they're going to keep him. Everything what's gone on up to this point, whatever they're doing in respects of their management group and who comes in and says what, it doesn't seem like they're all on the same page for a club the size of Man United, Kels, because you rightly mentioned with Man City, and when Man City we heard that Pep was coming in, Trixie was already there, everything was already in place. That's the way Man United should be moving.
Chicky Bagheera-style.
Chicky Bagheera-style. What do I call it?
Trixie.
It sounds cooler.
It is.
But the thing is, what I'm saying is that is the levels that Manchester United should be moving in. That's what should be happening, because now, if Ruud does come in, even if he does do well for a bit, is that they're going to go, oh, yeah, right, you're going to stay with you, Ruud. What's going to happen?
Well, that's the thing. We've seen those changes at board level, and it's how they filter down, then filter back up from the new manager.
Well, and there's so many voices then. I mean, the one thing I would say for them is Dan Ashworth, who they obviously really targeted, almost similar to the way City went after Guardiola. It's not quite to that level, but it does speak to his importance. He is considered one of the best in England, or one of the best in world football, at drawing up a technical plan. So it's exactly that kind of idea of what a club should look like in terms of structure. But now it's almost like, well, they can't. I was going to say they need to fast track it. That's probably what the last thing they should do, given what United have been like lately. But they do need clarity. And I think that's where the benefit of Ashworth comes in. But then you do wonder, it's like there's so many voices there, and so many voices with influence from Ashworth, Omar Barada, the CEO, Brailsford, who's such a close advisor to Ratcliffe himself. And yeah, obviously that's led to all these influences at these meetings, and they need it, exactly as you say, Kelly, a clear focus now.
And we'll find out what that... We're talking about Manchester United, who have parted company with Erik ten Hag. Ruud van Nistelrooy is going to be taking temporary charge of the situation, and they are looking for a permanent head coach. But what might that look like for Manchester United? And you can't... I mean, we look back on those incredible times under Sir Alex Ferguson, and he was... very, very broadly speaking, a man who kind of advocated for a 4-4-2, and that was the way that Manchester United played. But there was lots of flexibility within that. But there was very definitely a Ferguson way of playing. There was something that was identifiable when we saw them on the pitch. And part of that was Paul Scholes, who joins us on the line now. Thank you, Paul, for your time today. Good to talk to you.
Hi, okay.
Paul, I want to ask you about what happens now for Manchester United, because when you look at the appointments that they've made since Sir Alex Ferguson, none of them, they've all been very, very different, and none of them have worked out as Manchester United fans would have hoped that they did. What can they do now that's going to make things different, that's going to mean that this is the appointment that's different?
Well, I think that's the big question, Kelly. It's been a struggle, as you say, to find the right man. We felt we have a couple of times. You think of the stature of Jose Mourinho and Van Gaal. Obviously, David Moyes has great experience, and then Ten Hag came in from Ajax and done a great job. Was he doing an elite job at an elite football club? Probably not. So it was a little bit of a risk. But as you say, there've been 4 or 5 different types of people that you always think you've got a chance with them. Hasn't quite happened. And now they're on to the next one, whoever that may be. He has to be the best in class, which is what Manchester United need.
We've been talking about the importance of this decision in terms of how the new owners are perceived. And obviously they made kind of a decision over the summer in terms of keeping Erik ten Hag. But this is huge for them, and it could give us an idea of what they want from the club, what they want the club to be.
Yes, it will. We're not quite sure yet. They're still quite early into their reign, I suppose. It wasn't that clear that they really still wanted Ten Hag. And I know there was a meeting in the summer to review what had happened over the season, probably the past couple of seasons, which probably wasn't quite good enough. Obviously, that FA Cup probably saved his job. and it looks like in the background they have been speaking to people as well. We hear that Thomas Tuchel was mentioned, I think, just recently as well. I think Xavi's been linked with the job. So, look, it's the first major decision, I think, for Ineos, and they have to try and get that right.
Paul, do you think what you've seen from Ineos up to this point, with the way they've dealt with everything since they've got to United, the managerial situation and that, do you trust them going forward to try to get this right?
It's a very tough question to answer.
I know, that's what really put it out there for you, Scholesy.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thank you.
But it's like you say, it's very early days, though, Paul, isn't it? That's the point.
That's the thing.
It is very early days for them. I think the way they've gone about it hasn't been that great, to be honest. A lot of stuff has been leaked. I think they've even admitted that they spoke to people like Thomas Tuchel and some, as I mentioned. So I think the first impressions haven't been amazing. I think it's took probably a little bit too much time as well to make their mind up. I think if you look over his tenure over the last couple of years, there have been some really damning defeats, some really quite embarrassing results as a United fan, a United team. I go back to Crystal Palace last year. There was a 7-0, obviously, with Liverpool. Got beat by Bournemouth 3-0 last year as well at home, I think, in the league. And there's been a couple this year as well. You think of the Tottenham game, the Liverpool game at home, obviously Sunday as well. I just think they've took a little bit of time. I think some stuff has come out that possibly shouldn't come out, should be left behind closed doors. But now they've got a chance to try and get the right man. Who that is very hard to judge. I was a big Thomas Tuchel fan, but obviously that's gone. And he's managed trophies with big clubs. Obviously, that idea has gone now, so it'd be interesting to see which road they go down. Do you think that an established manager like a Tuchel is the right way forward? I know you're saying it's hard to pick individual names in terms of who the next Man United manager would be, but if you're looking broadly, if you were in charge of picking that, would you go for an established manager? Would you go for a certain type of football? Is there something that you think the new manager should have? I think he needs to have experience at an elite football club. This is one of the very biggest clubs in the football world, so so they should have the very best in class. The list there is, I think Zidane's the one out of that list for me who has been at a major club and won major honours. I'm not sure how well educated he is with his English language, or he really wants to come to England. You never really get that feeling with him. I think Amorim is an interesting one, but again, that's could be a risky one. We all know the style of play. He plays really good football. They were talking about him for City, which obviously tells you something about his pedigree. But could he come to Manchester? All these managers, not all of them, but most of them, they've been at clubs where probably the expectation isn't as high. I look at Thomas Frank when I see that, and I'm sure he's a very capable manager, might be a capable manager for Manchester United, but expectations are not what they are for Manchester United. At Manchester United, you have to win, and you have to do it with a certain swagger and a bit of entertainment as well. And the pressure really comes on, and we've had 4 or 5 managers who we thought could go on and be successful, and every one of them have failed. So it's big for Ineos now to try and get the right one.
Paul, do you think that's something that's almost underestimated? I mean, obviously being an elite coach is one thing, but it's actually having the personality and almost the kind of the character to... Yeah,
and I think that's probably where Ten Hag fell down a little bit. I think he was become quite difficult in press conferences as well with the character of him. But yeah, look, to manage Manchester United, I think you do need to have the full package. Obviously, we had Sir Alex, who was the best. Who wasn't that much of a coach, to be honest with you, but he knew how to manage. He knew how to get the very best out of players, and he always had somebody with him who was a top class coach. Now, there aren't many managers like that these days. Managers are not managers anymore; they're more coaches. So these coaches have to do what they do on the training field. They also have to manage as well. So finding that right person is going to be difficult. And like I say, expectations at that club are huge. The last couple of years have been so poor. Finished 8th in the Premier League last year. And the start of the season, obviously 14th in the Premier League now after 9 games. Haven't won a European game yet. 3 points, 3 draws. So it was inevitable it was going to happen. But as you said, the right man now is imperative. Whether that's a coach or a manager, normally a head coach is now, I think. So they have to do the homework. And I'm sure they've been doing the homework. Feels like they've been trying to find someone for quite some time and possibly haven't come across the right character or somebody who actually wants the job. So that's the challenge they've got now in the next couple of weeks to try and find the right man.
Paul, thanks very much for your time today. Good to talk to you.
Thanks, Paul. You're the greatest, Paul.
See you later.
Bye. Bye. Miguel, in terms of who Manchester United have looked at, and we touched on a couple of those names during the course of that conversation, there are names who've been very heavily linked with the club who are not at Manchester United. Is that a concern, the people who don't want the job?
Yeah, and it's something that has evolved over the past few years where obviously, Manchester United are such a size of club, have such a status that most managers would almost take it without thinking. But it feels like they've got to such a point now where there's been so many issues that if you're, it kind of comes back to that famous or that infamous comment that Brendan Rodgers had about Chelsea, where I'm trying to build a career, not destroy it. And you do wonder if you're a young manager on the up, like say someone like Amorim. Is this the best possible option?
Is he removed himself from everything now?
So I reported this to the Independent before we came on air.
Nice one.
But he's on United's list, obviously, but he doesn't want to leave mid-season.
Right.
He's doing well with Sporting. There's a huge buyout clause as well. I think it's 20 million euro for a foreign club. And also, he will have all sorts of options at the end of the season, including Man City, given that the sporting director there, the sporting director from Sporting, Hugo Viana, is replacing cheeky Begiristain.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think that if Guardiola doesn't renew, that it'll be Amorim in there. But nearly every club in Europe wants him. But even looking at that list as well, it speaks to Kelly's point about what type of manager and, how City pursued Guardiola for so long. Yeah. Amorim is very different to Xavi. And yet and Thomas Frank is completely different again.
You look at it, there's so many differences. Again, that just feeds back into, do you actually know what you want?
Is there also a point to be made about Ten Hag's career path? You mentioned the Ajax structure and how it's, for decades, it's been famous for having that structure all the way through the club. And managers who are successful there tend to work within that blueprint. And that doesn't always translate because there's a familiarity that's ingrained in the club. Someone like Thomas Frank, who's at Brentford, is in a club that is run in a specific way. If you look at the way that Brighton is run, there's always that succession plan. There's a difference between a manager who can come in or a head coach who can come in and stamp their authority and a head coach who can work within a structure.
Well, Kels, this is why...
I waffled, but you get the broad point.
Totally get it. It's a good point, Kels. That's why you look at someone like Graham Potter, leaving Brighton, so well-structured club, excuse me, and going to Chelsea, which was...
At the time was in flux.
At the time, it was all over the place. I think that Ten Hag, as well, leaving Ajax and coming to Man United, I'm sure for them to build some form of structure of what they were gonna play to. And this is where I was quite excited for him when he came there, because obviously he was doing very well there. I'm thinking that he's obviously going to recognise and bring some good players to Man United, and then add to the Man United grit and determination and winning mentality. I saw it was something that would have been perfect for him. Now, even seeing someone like Thomas Frank's name on there, I wouldn't like Thomas Frank to leave Brentford and go to Man United in this current climate, because Man United haven't got the structure and that behind him for him to be able to focus on being a coach, what gets the best out of the players, because he hasn't got that behind him. And that's what they're going to need to get. That's any manager that goes in there. They're going in there, like you rightly say, Miggy, and they're like, well, I'm not sure right now with Man United. It's not stable enough. And that is where I worry about them getting the right person.
It's a bit double-edged, isn't it? They need this kind of big figure to impose a structure, but then they also need a structure to attract the right
big
person.
Figure. And the thing is, with these managers, why they'll be like, wow. I'm still feeling like what happened with Thomas Tuchel, because we're talking about a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
He could have been the United manager. He's not the United manager. He's taken the England job, 18 months, albeit, but he must have known and thought, something, like you're saying, Miggy, that doesn't feel like a good fit for me right now. And if you look at Thomas Tuchel and where he is, the way he left Chelsea, the way he left Bayern Munich, to come somewhere like Manchester United, and it doesn't work out, really does lower your stock a bit. And maybe that's why I believe Thomas Tuchel's made the decision. He's going to manage England. We're going to hopefully win the World Cup, and then after that, he'll go and manage a domestic team again.
Right. Well, that's an aside, but it's an interesting prediction.
Yeah, can you imagine these options when he comes back? These options when he comes back.
Well, Manchester United will be hoping that they're not looking to change their manager at that stage, because the appointment that they make next will be the right one. Laurie Whitwell joins us now from The Athletic. He's the Manchester United correspondent. Laurie, thanks so much for your time today. I just want to ask you something that I don't think we've properly covered yet today, which is how this has been taken, how it's been received across the club in Manchester United, and by players, by fans, what you've heard from around the club.
Yeah, I was still waiting to get full information on the reaction, but certainly even last night I was speaking to people, and they, despite 18th place and this being trailed a potential sacking, they were surprised that something might happen after the West Ham game because of the way the game had gone, in terms of United creating chances, in terms of the huge controversy about the penalty decision at the end. Nonetheless, I don't think anybody can be really surprised that he's actually, been sacked now. I think the place is perhaps going to be, sort of looking at what the future holds with Ruud van Nistelrooy as well. I think he's certainly been visible on the touchline in recent weeks, and him stepping in as interim, it'd be interesting to see how long that lasts for. But certainly you've got some players that were just not fitting well with Ten Hag. I think we've already seen a little bit of social media reaction. Jadon Sancho's done a post on his Instagram stories. Rafa Varane has liked the post announcing Erik Ten Hag's departure. So you'll get a few players probably within the squad that are that way inclined as well. I think some were just thinking it's reached the end of its course here. He's trying different things, different team lineups. We're not too sure exactly what we're going to get from one week to the next. That being said, I don't think it was total revolt amongst the squad. I think they kind of understood that he was essentially a pretty good man with decent tactical ideas, but I think the way that he came across, certainly in the first 2 years when he was very strong disciplinarian, quite stubborn in his ways, I think that just ultimately perhaps caused a bit of an issue with certain players. And communication problem has been a factor, I think, from the get-go. His English isn't absolutely top, and I think that maybe causes a little bit of gaps to appear in terms of understanding. So yeah, I think the executive were debating this decision for a long time, and ultimately have decided to make the change now because they are not happy where the team is, and also the fact they haven't won yet in Europe.
Laurie, as we've been on air, we haven't been able to check the social media posts because we like to make at least a pretense of being professional on this show. And what's kind of been the tone of it?
Yeah, what's the fans' reaction?
I think a lot of the fans had already had their, they'd had it with Ten Hag. Let's put it like that. I think whilst after the FA Cup final, the fan sentiment was hugely supportive of him. It's a very emotive occasion, isn't it? Beating Man City in an FA Cup final, the glitter of the trophy, the confetti, and I think sort of perhaps 80% of fans at that point, there was actually surveys done, were backing him, and I think that's what Ineos reacted to, right? Like they had planned to make a change. They were speaking to different candidates. That ultimately saved his job, but then as the summer has gone on, as the results have continued to be bad, I looked this morning, and so across 27 games this calendar year in the Premier League, they've got 40 points, which is obviously nowhere near good enough. The goals as well, the fact that they scored, I think 58 goals, 59 goals in his first 2 seasons in the Premier League. They're on 8 goals now. I know they're not taking the chances they're creating, but that's still not good at all. And I think a lot of fans had basically come to terms with Erik Ten Hag not being their manager. So whilst there's no gloating about it, I don't think it had got to the toxic stage perhaps that Jose Mourinho had got. Certainly, not at the same kind of emotional connection point as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think there will be sadness at the fact that there's a guy here who won 2 trophies with Manchester United and wasn't able to provide success in the Premier League.
In terms of who the successor might be, in the dealings that you've had with the new owners and the kind of messages that have been coming out of them, is there any indication as to what they might want from the new man in charge at Manchester United? Because what we've been saying here in the studio is that the list of managers who are head coaches who are linked with the job is quite a disparate bunch. They've all got very different skill sets, very different levels of experience. Do you get a sense of what they might want as a blueprint?
We first were in this process, at the end of the season, the idea was that they would appoint a head coach, perhaps young, exciting, someone that could work within a structure. And that's, I think, what ideally they'd like to. So you look at Dan Ashworth, what he did at Brighton, the kind of approach he took at Newcastle as well. I know he didn't appoint Eddie Howe, but, that kind of synergy there. You look at Omar Barada, what he worked with at Man City, and Pep Guardiola, clearly huge personality, but also worked within a structure where you had the recruitment team recommending players and Pep Guardiola working with them. You look at Jason Wilcox, obviously from that environment as well. But then you've also got Sir Dave Brailsford and you've got Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And I don't think we can underestimate Sir Jim Ratcliffe's influence, opinion on this whole process. I know that he's spoken recently and said that it is up to the football guys. It's up to Dan Ashworth, it's up to Omar Barada. But I feel like his input, he has a strong opinion. I don't think we can discount his influence on this. So maybe that's why you've got this kind of list of candidates who are a bit, disparate. You're not really seeing a total alignment in where they're coming from with it. I know Miguel was speaking earlier about the different candidates as well. Gareth Southgate is one that has just kind of kept coming up when you speak to different people. And I know he said that he's going to take his time out and doesn't want another job for another, until next summer. I think if Manchester United come calling, then you can easily just say, well, okay, I couldn't turn this prospect down. And also you've got the Ruud van Nistelrooy factor there in terms of, okay, well, let's see how long he gets as an interim. Does that buy United a little bit of time? There is supposed to be a plan in place for, what comes next. Let's see. United appointed Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as an interim to replace Jose Mourinho and then ended up giving him the full-time job. So it's funny how, things change at Manchester United, but a lot stays the same as well.
Laurie, appreciate you coming on to talk to us. Thanks so much for your time.
I hate to interrupt you, Dermot, but we have certain reason to do so because Manchester United have sacked their manager, Erik ten Hag. A statement has just appeared on the club's website. It says Erik was appointed in April 2022 and led the club to 2 domestic trophies, winning the Carabao Cup in 2023 and the FA Cup in 2024. And Manchester United say, we are grateful to Erik for everything he has done during his time with us and wish him well for the future. Ruud van Nistelrooy will take charge of the team as interim head coach, supported by the current coaching team, whilst a permanent head coach is recruited. So that 2-1 defeat for Manchester United at London Stadium yesterday, that big late penalty which we've spoken about with Dermot this morning, has led to Erik ten Hag leaving his post. Sue, I asked the question a little bit earlier on this morning, how much longer can they give it? Clearly no longer.
No, and I was sort of looking at it earlier on in the season. Would it be till Christmas? Let's see where Manchester United are at that point. They've clearly thought that the time's right now. It just seems a bit bizarre that in the summer, they were clearly looking for a new manager. They didn't quite get who they wanted. They thought they'd stick with Ten Hag. They backed him. They'd give him the money. But now they just think Manchester United, when you look at the position that they're in, 14th in the table, it's just not good enough for a club of that magnitude. And they clearly think that they've got the right person, whether that's Van Nistelrooy in the interim, whether that's moving forward, or they've got somebody else in the background. But yeah, you say it's a surprise at the timing of it. I thought maybe we'd look to see what happened at Chelsea next week before the international break, but they clearly think that the time's right now.